Hello and welcome. We're going to tackle a really important question that a lot of growing nonprofits face. When is it actually time to outsource your compliance management?
This explainer is brought to you by Ironwood Registrations as part of our series designed to make these complex compliance topics a lot more practical for nonprofit leaders and their teams.
All right, let's get right into it. For most nonprofits, compliance starts out pretty simple. It feels totally manageable, and everything's just handled in-house.
In those early days, it really is simple. You're probably just fundraising in your home state, so there's one registration to worry about. The finance manager, or maybe even the executive director, they can handle the paperwork, track that one deadline, and everything just works.
But then, your mission takes off, and you start to grow, which is great. But that's exactly where the complexity starts to sneak in. All of a sudden, you're not just fundraising in one state, now there are several, and every single one has its own deadline. The paperwork starts piling up, and you realize you need way more coordination between your fundraising folks and your finance team. That simple little system, it starts to show its cracks.
And that brings us to the big question. At what point do you hit pause and ask yourself, is it time to get some outside help? Figuring this out is so important because it can help you prevent a crisis long before it ever has a chance to happen.
So let's talk about the key signs that your internal system might be hitting its limit. You can think of these as the warning lights flashing on your organization's dashboard.
The first sign is probably the most obvious one. You're fundraising in a bunch of different states. Once you hit 5, and definitely when you get to 10 or more, the complexity just explodes. Because each state is its own little universe. They have different rules, different deadlines, different fees. Trying to keep track of all that on a spreadsheet, well, that becomes a really high-risk game if you're not a specialist.
And that brings up a question you really should be asking your team. Are near misses starting to feel a little too common? Just think back to your last few filing deadlines. How did those go?
Because that's the second big warning sign. Deadlines are getting missed, or you're just barely making them. If you're constantly rushing to file at the 11th hour, or you're having to deal with deficiency notices from the state, or worse, you find out about a deadline after it's passed, these aren't just minor hiccups. They are crystal clear signs your system is overloaded, and it's time to think about a different way of doing things.
The third sign is when a gap starts to form between your development team and your finance team. Your fundraisers launched this amazing national campaign, but nobody stopped to check if you're actually registered to ask for money in all 50 states, or they go after a big out-of-state grant without making sure you're even eligible. When your ambition starts to outrun your compliance, you're creating some serious risk.
And that leads right to our next point. As your fundraising gets more sophisticated, maybe you're launching recurring donation programs or peer-to-peer campaigns where your supporters fundraise for you, or you're working with professional fundraisers, your regulatory exposure grows right along with it. Your compliance systems have got to keep up with that pace.
Okay, sign number 5 is a huge one, and it's all about strategy. Your leaders are spending their precious time on admin tasks. If your executive director is the one tracking renewal dates, or your CFO is stuck trying to navigate clunky state filing portals, that is time they are not spending on strategy, on governance, on growing the mission. It's a classic case of misusing your most valuable resources.
And finally, as your organization's revenue and public profile get bigger, so does the cost of a mistake. We're not talking about a small late fee anymore. The consequences can be really significant. We're talking hefty penalties, being publicly listed as delinquent, and, in some cases, you could even be forced to stop fundraising. The stakes just get so much higher.
Okay, so we've laid out all the warning signs. Now, let's flip this around and talk about the solution. What does outsourcing your compliance actually give you? Well, it's about a fundamental shift from being reactive and constantly putting out fires to having a proactive, managed system.
A managed compliance partner brings structure to the chaos. Just imagine having one centralized place to track all your states, a clear calendar with all your renewal deadlines mapped out, and an expert who's constantly watching for regulatory changes. They can proactively spot new requirements as you grow and manage all that documentation for you, taking that entire burden off your team.
But here's the real bottom line. The value isn't just about getting forms filed on time. The true value is about reducing uncertainty. It's about that confidence, that peace of mind of knowing you're in good standing everywhere you operate so you can actually focus on your mission.
This leads us to a whole new way of looking at the decision. It's so easy to see outsourcing as just another expense on a spreadsheet. But really, it's much more accurate to view it as a strategic investment in your organization's core infrastructure.
Let's just look at this side by side.
On one side, you have all these hidden internal costs, your senior staff's time being eaten up, the financial and reputational risk of penalties, and the very real chance of major disruption to your operations. But on the other side, outsourcing gives you a focused leadership team, proactive risk management, and the operational stability you need to fundraise with total confidence.
So, this is the crucial point. We have to start thinking about compliance in a bigger way. It's not just paperwork. It is the essential infrastructure that holds up everything else. It supports predictable revenue, clean expansion into new places, the trust of your donors, and the very integrity of your governance.
So with all that in mind, let's bring it back home to you. Here's a quick, practical self-assessment you can use to figure out if now is the right time for your organization to start thinking about this. Get your team together and have a really honest conversation. Ask these questions. How many states are we actually in right now? Do we have one single central system for tracking all our deadlines? Whose job is this internally, and seriously, how much of their time is it taking? And then the big one, thinking about our fundraising goals for next year. Are we genuinely confident that our compliance is where it needs to be? If you get a lot of "I don't know" or "I'm not so sure" as answers, well, that's a pretty clear signal right there.
If you only take one thing away from our time together, let it be this. It's time to outsource when the combined weight of all that multi-state complexity, your own growth, and the internal strain on your team becomes too much for your current systems to handle. Your management of this stuff should always scale right alongside your mission.
For more compliance guides and other in-depth educational resources on charitable registration and fundraising, please feel free to visit ironwoodregistrations.com. Thanks so much for watching.